Sue, out of a compassion, accompanied someone to Dignitas and has a real story to tell. So over to you, Sue.
So it's February the 16th this year, 5:30 in the morning, in the pitch dark. There's a loud banging on our door. The dog went berserk. My husband answered the door and called up, "Sue, it's the police, you better come down." I was arrested and taken into a police van with a locked cage in the back, which is where I was put, off to Cardiff Bay custody suite. As I left, four male officers entered the house and searched it, which took about 4 hours. Apparently no warrant was needed on this occasion because my alleged crime was the same as murder or terrorism. So why did this happen? In October 2021, there was a BBC Wales Investigates documentary asking the question, when would you want to die? There were 3 scenarios depicted, one of which involved a tetraplegic woman, Sharon Johnston, who was living in Carmarthenshire. She'd provisionally been given the green light to go to Dignitas at some future date, but because of her extreme physical difficulties, she had to have an escort. She had no family, and because she'd moved around from place to place while she was having rehabilitation after her injury, she'd lost touch with many of her closest friends. Because I also now live in Wales and I'm known as a campaigner to try and get a change in the law, I was asked to go. It's not the sort of question you expect to be asked every day. But as a humanist, I knew that if I was in her situation, I would hope that somebody would step up and help her. So aside from the possibility of a 14-year prison sentence, I couldn't honestly think of a good enough reason to say no. I felt it was a calculated risk because there'd actually been so few prosecutions in recent years. And I was pretty sure that the CPS guidelines would be met in my case. A medical report Sharon had submitted to Dignitas was out of date. It needed redoing. Fortunately, the chair of the Wales branch of MyDeath-MyDecision happens to be a doctor. So we went to visit Sharon on the 16th of December, the only time actually that I met her before we travelled to Switzerland, and the revised report was done and approved. Bear in mind that everything Sharon did, anything that needed to be printed or packed for her journey had to be done by her carers. She had a very small amount of movement in her right hand, that was all. So a date of the 15th of February was agreed, and Sharon made all the complex travel arrangements and booked a taxi, a wheelchair adapted taxi, to pick me up en route. So she left Cardigan at 5 AM on the morning of the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, and I joined the journey in Cardiff at 7 o'clock. I can only assume that her carers must have reported her missing when they arrived at her flat, as they normally would at 7:30, because it wasn't long after 7:30 that the first call from the police came through to Sharon's phone. She assured them that she was fine. She told them that she was visiting friends in Cardiff. They expressed concern and asked questions about who, what, where, and so on. When she declined to answer, simply repeating that she was absolutely fine, the call ended. Half an hour later, another call from the police, similar process. It was incredibly stressful for her on an already very stressful day. Another half an hour or so went by, and then social services rang. Similar conversation. It's rather difficult to understand these interventions because social services had actually visited Sharon just 3 days earlier to check how she was doing. Found her, having capacity, she was fine. And was she a prisoner in her accommodation, unable to leave without their permission? She was never, in my opinion, missing. They knew exactly what she was planning to do. They knew it was her decision and hers alone. In any event, we expect at any moment to see blue lights before we stopped on the M4. Well, Sharon found it very alarming. However, we finally made it to Heathrow, and she was, I can only use the expression, manhandled into her seat on the plane. That was an undignified process in itself. But we were on our way. On arrival in Zurich, Sharon had arranged a private ambulance to transfer to the Dignitas house so that the paramedics could help her transfer into a bed. The lovely Andrea greeted us and gave us a warm welcome. We arrived about 5 p.m, so by this time Sharon had been travelling for 12 hours, and the lovely Dr. Hoover arrived about an hour later. We talked to Sharon about her decision, checked that she was still firm in her resolve, and she was. Dr. Hoover and Andrea left. Another person who travelled with us, who I'll call M, is a PhD researcher doing a thesis on assisted dying. She was going to stay in a local hotel overnight, and she and I planned to get something to eat while Sharon made a couple of phone calls that she said she wanted to make. It was dark by this time, the blinds were closed. There was a knock on the door. M peered through the blinds. It was the Swiss police. David Powis had asked the Swiss police to intervene. So after an hour of questioning, they must have concluded that Sharon hadn't been abducted. She was of sound mind and there entirely of her own volition. Our nerves, as you can imagine, were in tatters, especially Sharon's. We made sure that she was okay, and Em and I left her to her phone calls and finally began to recover over some bruschetta and, I must say, quite a large glass of wine. I walked back to the Dignitas house at about 10 o'clock, giving Sharon some food and helped her get settled for the night. By some miracle, we seemed to manage to get some sleep. Andrea and another carer, Daniela, came at 8 o'clock on the 15th. Dr. Hoover also returned to check once again that everything was in order. After a short conversation, he left, bidding Sharon a pleasant journey. She was given an anti-emetic drink, and we sat talking quietly while that worked. At 9 a.m, Sharon drank the medicine that would end her life through a straw, and within a minute or two she fell asleep. She woke briefly and just said, "This is a lovely feeling." A minute later she was gone. It was calm. Actually, it was beautiful. Em and I discussed what we might do while waiting for our 5 p.m. flight. And it was only 9:30, we realised that actually there was a lunchtime flight that if we left straight away we could get. Andrea called a taxi for us and we were on our way, planned to be heading home. We later discovered, had we caught the 5 o'clock flight, the police were at Heathrow waiting to arrest us. It seemed to us that the police action seemed to be heavy-handed. We know of several other accompaniments to Dignitas, to Life Circle and Pegasus, where no one has received so much as a phone call. If nothing else, surely the law, which is the same through England and Wales, must be applied consistently. M was arrested at 11:30 on the 15th in London, taken all the way to Lawford, which is near Llanelli, to be questioned. So she endured 7 hours round trip travelling, plus 20 hours in a cell. As you already know, my arrest was in the early hours of the next morning, and I was held for just over 19 hours. We were both kept under arrest pending investigation for 6.5 months. Our goods were seized, laptops, iPads, phones, Amy's research notes, her recordings. They kept my passport and my driving licence, so I had no ID for months. They seized my husband's laptop and phone, so we recovered our property more than 7 months after we were arrested. And of course, we had to replace everything by then in order to do our work. All this could and should, in my opinion, have been avoided if we had a humane law in England and Wales. It's beyond time, I think, for at least a public inquiry, so that the concerns that some people have expressed can be thoroughly explored with expert evidence from medics, from lawyers, from politicians in jurisdictions where the laws have changed and are working.
Thank you, Sue, for that